Congressman, good to have you back on the show.
Great to be with you, John, as always. The guy that's ferreting out the hard hidden facts in Washington, D.C. They bury them deep, but you dig them up.
We just keep drilling, just like you do. I mean, I think of all the great work you've done and all the oversight investigations that you've done and how much we're learning, even in the last couple of days, where we now know that Brennan may have misled Congress in ways that, we didn't know the proof was that strong until a couple of days ago. As you step back now and we look at Russia collusion, it looks to me that more than a bungled FBI investigation, there may have been a more formative conspiracy going on. Maybe Comey and Brennan and maybe President Obama himself, they seem to know a lot more than just this bungling FBI not telling the FISA court what it needed to know. Are you starting to see pieces of that when you look back at the famous Brennan briefing with Obama and then the things we learned in the last week?
Well, we've always kind of, I hate to say it, humans are the only ones that kind of ignore their instincts and what, some people call their spidey senses, right? An animal, a wild animal doesn't do that. They see you. They don't wait to see if you're going to walk up to them. They run, right? They preserve their life. But humans, we second guess ourselves, and we shouldn't in too many cases. And this is one of them. Our spidey senses have been tingling for a long time. Everything pointed to it. But let's face it, it's going to be hard to get the evidence unless one of these guys turns on the other ones and just kind of tells the truth about the whole thing, right? So they're all in it together. And since they know they're all in it together, as long as they all keep their mouth shut, none of the information can be verified. But it seems that over time, look, I don't think it was a bungling, FBI, they just fumbled along and this kind of happened. I think this was an operation from the start. They didn't want Trump. They didn't want Flynn. They didn't want anybody opening up the trunk of this vehicle to see what's in it. They didn't want all the secrets and the things they've been doing on behalf of the United States of America that were questionable. They don't want any of that stuff out, not only for their own reputation. They don't want the agency besmirched, but let's face it, they want to keep doing this stuff.
Yeah, no, that it is. And because there's been so little consequence for what's already been done, they have the boldness to keep doing it too, which I think is the scary part. We just haven't created enough deterrence with prosecution and penalty to take the temptation to do this away in the future.
There's been no prosecution, as I can tell, and no penalty whatsoever. I've been in a position to ask questions about the FISA misgivings, the misuse and abuse of the FISA courts, and where are the consequences, where's the accountability, and I want the names of the accountability and what the accountability is. John, I'm still waiting.
It's crazy, isn't it? We're still waiting for the Epstein documents. We're still waiting for some of the Russia collusion documents. We're still waiting for an awful lot. It is maddeningly
it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
It is.
We understand things that are of a national security concern, where if they're publicly known and our enemies and adversaries and maybe even some of our allies, if they knew them, would pose a national security threat. But things that happened, 30 years ago or what have you, or even less than that, but are not a national security threat, but are afoul of the law. And especially if it comes down to taking down a president or a candidate for president for political purposes, that's a national security threat from the inside. That's not from an outside international enemy. That's an inside enemy, and that arguably is more grave than somebody from outside the country.
Yep. Yeah. No, it really is. It is. It's an immediate, imminent threat to our republic and our constitutional construction of government. It's such a moment of consequence, I think, all around. I want to pivot to something else that you have played such a important role on. And as a member, former chairman of the Freedom Caucus, the constant tug of the Freedom Caucus literally moved the center of gravity. I think Scott Besson said this in a TV interview over the week, and I thought it was well done. It actually moved the debate over spending to a different location. And for the first time, we saw Congress cut spending, not nearly as much as we need to solve our problem, but we cut spending, which just hasn't happened in my lifetime. Now, with the big, beautiful bill done, and you see some spending cuts, and you get the rescissions done, President Trump gets this extraordinary ruling from the Supreme Court earlier this week, said, hey, the president can go about firing and restructuring the government the way he wants. That's what the American people elected him to do. That seems to me like that could be another cutting mechanism that might go far beyond the courage of Congress. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's potentially massive. And let's just start back with the bill. You remember in the spring of this year, so January, February, Republicans went down to Doral in Florida. They had a meeting down there. They came back and they said, we're prepared and can be only able to cut $300 billion out of a $7.2 trillion budget. And of course, a bunch of us were not only disgusted, but we were obviously disappointed, but we just would not accept that. And look, Washington, D.C. is all about leverage. So without the Freedom Caucus and without us pushing, I'm going to tell you what this bill would have looked like. It would have been all the tax cuts we want. Remember, we went to war with Great Britain, the biggest, greatest military and the prowess of a nation on the planet at the time. We went to war over a 3% tax, right? So Republicans have always been for people keeping more of their money. So this bill would have been all the tax cuts, including no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on the Social Security, ensuring the tax cuts remain permanent and even doing more on immediate expensing and so on and so forth for the vast majority of working class people. I need to add that because, the claim is that it's only for the wealthy, which is that's a complete lie.
That's not true. Not true at all.
That'd have been the biggest part of the bill. We'd have done the border, we'd have done the military, and that would be it. That would be the lion's share of the bill. But because of the Freedom Caucus and the leverage we used, because we know, and we ourselves want the tax cuts, and we want the border, and we want the military funded, but you can force them to get into the spending cut circumstance, which is historic. And that would not have happened without us. This bill looks 100% different than it would have under any other circumstance in the past, except for the efforts of the members of the Freedom Caucus, those on Budget Committee, those on Energy and Commerce, and the various other committees that basically folded our hands and said, and look, we work with the Senate as well. As you know, John, there are a few great senators over there that said, we can't continue to bankrupt the country. We're going to take this as far as we can. This is our one shot. And so we turned $300 billion into $1.6 trillion in savings. Is it enough? Absolutely not. But it's what we could get out of these members of, and look, there were no Democrats, right? This is Republicans. So just imagine how much worse it would have been if Democrats had been involved at all.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah, you would have had far more resistance. Yeah. We would have got nothing. Yeah.
We would have been spending money like a house afire, and 7.2 would have just kept going. We're at this point, we're running $2 trillion deficits. Now, remember, we had a rescission come over, and it was a struggle for the House to pass. It was actually my bill plus USAID. My bill was to defund NPR and all that public broadcasting stuff. But we only won that by a vote or two, and it was negotiated till while the vote was going on. So let's not act like Congress is finding all the savings and is willing to do the right thing about it. The good news is that the president is going to do pocket rescissions if he expects that Congress is not going to pass this stuff. He's just going to do it himself at the end of the year. And then, of course, with the Supreme Court decision, and we know what the president wanted to do with Schedule F, literally the president, these people all work for the president, but he doesn't have any control over them except until the Supreme Court decision. And now the president, I think, is going to really look at legitimately restructuring the government so that it reflects the will of the people of the United States of America, as opposed to the bureaucracy in the swamp that seems to think that, all we do out here in flyover country is pay our taxes and accept their will. I think you're going to see something very different and very dramatic. And I think the president's ready for this.
Yeah, and I think we got one example of what this looks like now. The Supreme Court gave the president the power to reshape and save money on his own beyond government. The Health and Human Services Secretary, Bobby Kennedy Jr., today announcing that his department has made a major policy change. All illegal immigrants are banned from all taxpayer-funded benefits under the purview of HHS. So that is Medicare, Medicaid. That is a remarkable change. He's using some authority under what's known as the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 96, but going back 30 years to find a law. But this is another place where all of a sudden these states can't spend that money anywhere. More savings are being achieved just through the administrative fiat. I'd love to get your reaction to what Bobby Kennedy did this morning.
Well, of course, it's the right thing to do. Look, we all want to help. We know people want to come to America for a better life, and we have a legal pathway to do that, and we're more generous than every other nation. As a matter of fact, all other nations combined in that regard. But what we can't have is people just coming across our border and availing themselves to these programs. We have legitimately American citizens waiting in line for care because people that are here illegally are in front of them. It is unacceptable. This is America, and we want to be generous, but we have to take care of our folks first. And you got to follow the law if you want to come to America. Follow the law, and then. Part of that is you're contributing to America. You're not just coming and being a parasite to it. We still have, even though America is a great, powerful country, we've got to compete against our adversaries, Russia, Iran, China, and we can't do it by spending all this money on people that don't belong here and aren't invested in the greatness of America. It's the absolute right thing to do. Congress should codify that in law. We shouldn't be waiting on the administrative state, but I'm sure happy that a Democrat, Bobby Kennedy, has been willing to do it and do it for all the right reasons. It's absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah. You start cutting federal bureaucrats' jobs. You start cutting federal subsidies to illegal immigrants. That budget just keeps coming down. And I think there's just a dynamic here that many of us couldn't even have imagined a year ago when Biden was president. But even a few months ago, it didn't seem like this many things could happen, but they're starting to fall into place. I want to shout out one other important thing you do. It's actually important to so many Americans. I'm a pet lover. I've got dogs and cats. And there was a long history of tortuous animal research at NIH that was going on. And almost none of it had a benefit to Americans. It was research for the purpose of research and money, but it didn't actually benefit humanity. You have been in the lead on this for a long time. Jay Bhattacharya, day by day, is starting to roll back each of these programs. Give us a thought on where we are in that process. Are you happy where they started and what's next?
Well, I'm happy that it has started. And look, we want to keep people safe. We want to keep Americans safe, humans safe. And sometimes it does require testing on, especially on the final stages of some of these therapeutics, drugs, et cetera. It does require testing on animals, but that should be the bare minimum. We should not be, as a matter of course, making any living being suffer for the sake of funding, for the sake of some agenda. And of course, that's what was happening. And of course, the prime example is these poor beagles that were debarked, face put in a clamp and put in a cage with biting flies. I mean, this is horrific and it's sadistic, and Americans don't want their tax dollars going to any of that kind of stuff. So I'm very happy that Jay Bhattacharya is there, and I'm happy that he's focused on that. We're a humane country. We have technology. There are a lot of ways to get to the same results without making some poor living creature suffer. And if you're willing to do that, it's not a far leap from doing other things. We've seen that in history, and we must at every single turn reject that kind of thinking and normalizing that. And for the people that did it, like Fauci, I'm still hopeful that they can be prosecuted for it.
Yeah, we know the Tuskegee Airmen were subjected to Tuskegee experiments were subjected to, and we back under Fauci's reign, there were foster children in New York that were used to test AIDS drugs without parental supervision. There's a history of this, and and that's why stopping it at this point is so important. And you've done that. I want to turn to one last thing. It happened yesterday, but a lot of people are still talking about it. And I think it does scratch the head for a lot of us. The government doctor who treated President Trump in the White House, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, takes the Fifth Amendment when asked whether Joe Biden was fit for office. Your thoughts on what we learned?
Well, look, in a way, I don't blame the guy. He doesn't want to lie. He knows that Joe Biden, while sitting in the presidency, while having been inaugurated as the president, wasn't really running the country, wasn't making the decisions, and the doctor doesn't want to be the guy that verifies that and then nullifies all the signatures on pardons, on legislation, on significant executive action. It's unfortunate, but what happened, I think we're really seeing very clearly now, is that the president was a vessel for the weaponized and radical left wing, and they just used him. And unfortunately, in his condition, and in many cases, we don't know how many, really had no idea what was being done on his behalf. Unfortunately, the rest of the country and the world is now suffering under those conditions. And of course, this guy doesn't want to be responsible for that having happened in the first place, but B, having it unraveled after the fact. And so he's just clamming up. And look, he's probably potentially prosecutable for these kind of things. So I expect that he's going to be heavily lawyered up, and he's not going to be saying a thing without being forced to say it. And the truth is a powerful thing, and it not only will set him free at some point, but it might set the rest of us free.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. One of the things that Congress could do to get beyond this claim of Fifth Amendment is to go and immunize him, give him limited immunity. Is that something that you think Congress might consider to get the truth for the American people? Or
yeah, I think obviously if you're going to grant that kind of clemency, what have you, or take away the fear of prosecution, you have to know in advance what he's going to say, or have a pretty good idea of what he's going to say. And if what he's going to say is going to validate and corroborate what we all kind of believe in our gut to be true, then I think it's something that should be considered.
No, I think that's
the American people need to know. They need to know.
They do. This is something that affected an election and potentially the ability of a president to function in a moment of crisis. And we have not been given a straight answer. We're just starting to get a little bit of an answer. It's way too late.
Right. You're exactly right, John. Yep.
Congressman, as always, it's a great honor to have you on the show. I love all the work you're doing, and much more ahead of us. I think the American people are getting excited about the direction that this country is going in. And that's the first time in at least 5 years they've felt excited. So good things seem to be ahead.
Well, they sure are. We're not going to stop. I know that while this guy pled the fifth, he's not the last one we're going to go to, and we're not going to be done with him or this story or any of the other stories that you mentioned so far just now, and many others that are happening. So, look, you keep a seatbelt on and keep your head, keep your eyes on a swivel, as we used to say when we were flying, because there's going to be a lot happening. It's been a fast first 6 months, and the next 6 aren't going to be any slower. So be ready.
Yep, it's there's no stop in the dash. It's going to keep going. So, well, as always, a great honor. Thanks for spending so much time and bringing us up to speed. We always exit these interviews a lot smarter than we came into. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John. Have a great day.
You too, sir. Thank you so much.